It's quite amazing I should be speaking to engineers today. About 2 days ago, I was speaking to a friend who is an engineer and who seriously thinks that engineering or the world revolves around engineering. Actually, he suggested to me. This friend suggested to me that everyone should study engineering, regardless of what profession they're going to go into. I'm not sure whether he was right, but one thing I have discovered as somebody who's running an organization is that every organization needs an engineer, regardless of the nature of the organization. And we have since appointed an engineer to assist us with our organizational design, process review, and re-engineering of our processes. I was curious, why would engineers be interested in a topic such as corruption and ethics? In the infrastructure engineering industry. Much as I was curious, I realized though that it's not the first time I come across engineers who have an interest in issues other than engineering business. I'm a member of the World Justice Forum, and some of the very active members of the World Justice Forum are engineers. And I've heard from them explain why it is important for them to be part of the World Justice Forum. They've indicated to me that the rule of law should not just be the concern of lawyers. We all live in society, and how society is managed affects everyone. And of course, if you are in the engineering industry, you'd like to know that when you get contracts, those contracts firstly will be issued in accordance with the law, and secondly, should things go wrong, the rule of law is going to be respected. Why an interest in corruption? I suspect part of the reason you'd have an interest in corruption is because you want a level playing field. As professionals, you'd like to know that if you run a company that operates with integrity and delivers excellent service, that will be good enough to get you business. You don't want to find yourself in a situation whereby you are the best in the field, but the deal goes to someone who is not even worthy to be considered. As I was reflecting on this address, I thought about a story that was told to us at an anti-corruption conference in a West African country. We were told a story about a man who was an engineer and owned he wasn't a civil engineer incidentally, and owned a very big and successful construction company. One day, he got a call that told him that his daughter had died. And she was traveling in a school bus, and as she was traveling in the school bus, a bridge collapsed. What was remarkable was that the engineer wasn't so much concerned about the daughter, what really happened, did she die instantly, was she taken to hospital? The only question he asked was, which bridge? The storyteller later told us about the bridge. It turned out that this very successful business person had built many things in society. And one of the things he had built was a bridge. And there was an opportunity given to him to make a decision whether or not to proceed with the construction project or to impair the whole project and start afresh. We are told, since I'm not an engineer, and I don't know whether 0.000 something degrees matters, but in this particular story we're told that something was skewed, but the extent to which it was skewed was, to us ordinary people, something minor, but to an engineer it impacted on the strength of the structure. He was informed about that when they assessed the bridge as it was going up. He chose expediency at the time and said they must proceed regardless of the fact that the bridge or something was skewed. They concluded the bridge, and he chose to pay the inspector, because it was an inspector who came to check the bridge and was suggesting that the bridge be destroyed and the whole project be started from square one. He paid off the inspector and the project proceeded. I would like to believe that the people in this particular room, you are here because you have an interest in doing your job with integrity. You're not the kinds of people who would want to proceed when somebody has indicated that the foundations of RDP houses are flawed. I would like to believe that you are here because you're the kind of people who would start the project from square one in order that you have something that is structurally sound and that won't give us problems in the future. Civil engineering is one of the most critical aspects of infrastructure development. I was told by the organizers, to whom I'm grateful for this opportunity, that one of the things you are looking at is the National Development Plan. And the National Development Plan places a lot of emphasis on infrastructure development. And that's a great opportunity for our country and a great opportunity for professionals from all walks of life, lawyers, engineers, not just civil engineers, various kinds of engineers. That's a great opportunity. But there's also great risks. As we go into infrastructure development, there's great risks in terms of things not being done according to spec, not being done on time, and sometimes not being done at all. In his budget vote speech earlier this year, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan announced that government will invest a staggering 847 billion rand in infrastructure development over the next 3 years. He told the joint sitting of Parliament that about 1 trillion rand had already been spent in infrastructure development in the last 5 years. The massive infrastructure investment is not only meant to develop our cities, towns, townships, and rural communities, but it is also aimed at improving the quality of life of South Africans, as we've already noted. Through the construction of roads, railway lines, ports, power stations, hospitals, schools, dams, and shelter, the constitutional vision that promises our people an improved quality of life is going to be realized. Of course, the constitutional vision is not dependent only on infrastructure. There are various aspects of life that need to be addressed through service delivery. But things such as quality transportation, electricity, public health care, education, water, sanitation, and housing are key to an improved quality of life. Why so? Because the Constitution promises everyone an improved quality of life in the preamble. But inside the Constitution, particularly in Chapter 3 of the Constitution, that quality of life is given a concrete expression in the form of a Bill of Rights. That Bill of Rights promises people the right to human dignity, right to equality, right to various social and economic rights. And those social and economic rights include access to health care, education, water, food, and housing, among other things. But for infrastructure to be developed, we need skills, we need knowledge, we also need discipline. You've asked me to speak about ethics and corruption, and I would like to get into that particular field right now. We know that government does not deliver its own infrastructure. Government lays the foundation, sets the rules, and provides the money. It is professionals from all walks of life that give meaning to these promises on infrastructure. As we look at the National Development Plan, we are looking at professionals coming to the party. Why should we be concerned about corruption in that particular context? Well, as I indicated, as I was preparing this speech, I thought about that engineer and what he did and how it came back to hurt him and hurt other people. Of course, we know that he was hurt because his daughter died. Other people's daughters died as well. But society suffered as well in a sense that for a little while there was no bridge, and therefore that road could not be used. And secondly, more money had to be found to restore the bridge. That is why corruption matters. What is corruption? Corruption is defined in the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act as an act where one party is influenced by another to make a decision that is self-serving for gratification. In other words, I make a decision that I wouldn't have made that benefits the person who is influencing me to make that decision for gratification. That person gives me gratification. For corruption to happen, there has to be two parties. If we go back to the bridge that I spoke about, there was an inspector, there was the business owner. The business owner was the corruptor, corrupted the inspector by saying, let's make a deal. And in the end, the project proceeded when they should have taken a step back. And that's how really corruption occurs in society, in various areas of life. In South Africa and elsewhere in the world, we talk about two kinds of corruption. What we call retail corruption, which is very transactional and very small scale. And then we have grand corruption, which often involves many parties. If I go back to the case I started with, in such a case, corruption would involve multiple parties, the inspector, his underlings, and other parties who were supposed to sign off on that breach. It was encouraging for me to note that you, as SAICE, have a code of ethics. And I noted that among other things, you have undertaken to act with integrity and fairness, to have regard for the public interest and for the interests of all those affected by your professional activities. 3, to maintain and broaden competence and assist others to do so. 4, exercise appropriate skill and judgment. 5, avoid conflict of interest. 6, treat people with dignity. And 7, don't misrepresent your areas of experience and responsibility. It really would be nice if all engineers, even if they're not your members, adhered to this code of conduct, because some of the stories that we come across in government would not happen if this were true. I speak to you as the public protector, somebody who heads an institution that investigates improper conduct, alleged or suspected improper conduct in state affairs, reports on that conduct and take appropriate remedial action. That is the power given to this institution by Section 182 of the Constitution, read with Section 181. We operate also in terms of the Public Protector Act that gives this office the power to investigate maladministration and to remedy the impact thereof. And we also operate in terms of the Protected Disclosures Act that allows people who see wrongdoing to deposit their knowledge with us, my office and the Auditor General. Lastly, we also operate in terms of the Housing Protection Measures Act, which allows my office to review the decisions of the National Home Builders Registration Council, meaning when neighbors are not happy, even outside government, with the work of a builder, and the National Home Builders Registration Council makes a decision they don't like, that matter may come to my office for review. I started by saying that with your code of ethics, there's a lot of hope, and if people acted in accordance with that code of ethics, there would be no problem. In fact, we would be out of business insofar as the construction industry is concerned. But in reality, there are a few problems that we've come across that involve unethical conduct and corruption. I wanted to just talk to you about only 2 to avoid getting all over the place. There's only one case I'm not going to talk to you about. It's a case called Secure in Comfort, because I have been asked to shut up on that case. So I will not discuss that case. But I thought I could discuss 2 cases, though, that are relevant to you as people who are concerned about revolutionizing your industry so that there could be a win-win situation, because there's no doubt in my mind that there's room for win-win. If you do the right thing, there's so much opportunity for this industry. Now, let's talk about a few bad apples. Nala, Orange Free State. Well, Nala in Free State, it's not Orange Free State anymore. Right. We had a case there that for me was the most shocking case ever. One of the most shocking cases we've come across around corruption and unethical conduct. We came in there in Nala when already people had been to the streets complaining about poor service delivery, systemic service failure. The main cause of the complaint was twofold: incomplete RDP housing, and secondly, sewage everywhere, and a dysfunctional bucket system. When we investigated, we found that a forensic audit had already been done and had found wrongdoing. All that needed to have happened is implementation of that, and it hadn't happened. That's why people were not happy. When we scratched the surface and got into the meat of the matter, we found that there were 2 things that had happened. Is that although the municipality had paid for a water treatment plant there, it hadn't been completed, and now more money was needed, although they had paid for a full a full project, a completed project, the project was not complete. That was one part of the problem. But the second part of the problem was that they had found houses there that didn't have toilets, the old houses, and government had invested a lot of money into building a waterborne toilet system. All was done, somebody was procured, and they were paid for work done. It turned out they hadn't done the job. We visited one Gogo Dlamini. We referred to the ideal complainant to our office as Gogo Dlamini. We visited a grandmother there, and we saw one of those toilets. The piping system went just to the front of the toilet, and it went nowhere. It didn't go into a main pipe that was then draining everything to the sea or wherever it was supposed to go. Clearly, it wasn't one house that had that problem, where we could say it was a mistake, somebody just buried everything and they forgot to check this one. The entire township was in that situation. Firstly, you would say the person who did that was unethical because they were paid for. They were paid for a complete project. But the corruption was not just by that person. In every project, before anyone pays, private sector or government, before anyone pays, you have to certify that the job has been done according to specs. Who is the engineer at the municipal level who certified that the job had been done properly? The other case is Bramfisherville here in the city. Built before democracy around 1991. Particular specs were agreed to. We came in again when the whole place was the victim of sewage all over the place. There was sewage all over the place. Quick investigation by Johannesburg Water and other engineers that we asked to assist us to find out what happened, found that the piping that was underground was not the piping that was signed for. In other words, the diameter for the pipes was smaller than the diameter that was signed for. That means, again, somebody skimmed from government. Government paid for something that was more sizable, and they put something smaller. But then these smaller pipes couldn't take the pressure. Throughout the complaint, somebody kept going there and just fixing the problem. Even though they call themselves engineers, I thought that engineering operates on a systems approach. If you're looking for a problem, you don't just go and sort it out in one place and just bandage it there. But they had been doing that. That's why the problem kept recurring. Until under this intervention by my office, they were forced to look at the entire system, to look at where the pressure might be coming from. What are the lessons we've learned there? Firstly, it is important that people that are employed are people with a track record. Track record of integrity, track record of competence. But secondly, that those inside the system make sure that there is proper quality control. And when we sign off and say things have been done, things have been done. In other words, it's a two-way street. To ensure that we have a functional system, it's a two-way street. In the same way that corruption itself is a two-way street. There is a corrupter and there is the corrupted. I must indicate, though, that there's been a lot of infrastructure development in this country since the onset of democracy. It speaks to the integrity of the profession that there are only a few case studies that are coming to the floor. Of course, even if there are a few, they are a few too many. But I'm not suggesting that we have a systemic problem where the entire profession is doing the wrong thing. And that is going to be important. We've just done a stadia for the 2010 World Cup. A lot of them are still standing, and which suggests that the right thing was done. However, in conclusion there, I would like to talk to you about other problems beyond the problems of shoddy work and corruption that allows that shoddy work to be paid for. Recently, you are aware that we had a problem of stadia, where there was a finding by the Competition Commission that there was colluding in inflating the pricing of those stadia. People would argue that that inflation of pricing has systematically affected the entire construction industry. The cost of cement is no longer what it's supposed to be, and the cost of other things. In other words, when you mess up on one part of the system, the entire system may be impacted. Of course, there are those who are arguing that why did we call it colluding or call it maladministration? Shouldn't we just call it corruption? I have explained that the Competition Commission dealt with it in terms of its act, and in terms of its act, it had to deal with it as collusion. But that doesn't prevent anyone investigating it as corruption, because it clearly was corruption. From our side, I've already spoken to you about what we dealt in Nala. Our report was called Pipes to Nowhere, as the situation was. Read that report. Another report where we have found that there was wrongdoing, perhaps not in doing shoddy work, but again corruption, is on the point of tenders. This was a sophisticated scheme where the tender process was done according to the book. There's a proper tender advertised, a proper selection process, and what appears to be the best company gets the tender. But inside that system, the competition is systematically eliminated for small things. And we also found that those who got the tender for the program management unit were entering into deals with those they were going to manage. They were entering into deals whereby the company that was quality assuring on behalf of government was actually doing the work. And your code of conduct talks about not placing yourself in a conflict of interest. Now, if you are the ones who are going to do the design and you're the one who's going to quality assure, clearly there's a conflict of interest. Apart from the fact that there's corruption in that you are pretending that the company that you are supervising is doing the designs when you yourself are doing the designs. That was on the point of tenders. There are other things that we found on the point of tenders and many of these other investigations is overbilling or inflation of costs, false billing or billing for work not done, shoddy work but contractors paid in full, scope creep, where you start with a small scope of work and you increase it yourself because there's no proper quality assurance in government, and dishonest certification of projects. In the main speech, I've spoken to you very briefly about how overbilling happens, but I can speak to you about that when you ask questions. But basically, it talks to billing more than what you are supposed to be paid for. You do a project which was supposed to be 200,000, and you do work for 200,000, but when it comes to final payments, you bill them for more because they don't check the invoices. You keep double billing or triple billing for some of the periods in question. We come across a lot of those in the housing, in the RDP housing program. False billing is worse than overbilling, because overbilling, you do the work and you charge more. You double invoice or triple invoice. False billing means you just don't do it. It's plain theft. You don't do the work, you just bill for something you didn't do. And that's what we have seen in Nala and in a lot of the RDP housing programs, where somebody signs for 200 houses and builds 80. doesn't build the 120, but collects for 200 houses. One premier informed me that he eventually went to the field himself to count the houses and found that indeed the houses were short, because staff came back and said, no, all of the houses were there. And yet the community was saying, no, not all of the houses were there. It requires integrity. Because the person, again, who signs and says, you built 200 houses, when you built 80, there may be corruption in that they are paid to say you built 200 houses, or they're just plain lazy, they don't go there and count. Shoddy work, we get a lot of complaints in this particular case, but one good example is the issue of foundations, where the structural unsoundness in these houses, and somebody okays it after the appropriate agencies have come back and said the structural unsoundness, you must start from square one. Somebody comes after a political solution has been found and says build upwards. Those houses go upwards, but later they come crumbling down. We've seen it happening a lot in the Northwest, when a municipal manager came and said, we must start from square one, after 3 agencies had said that the foundations were unsound. They moved forward and they just got him out of the system, but those houses have fallen apart. Then government has to pay for a so-called rectification program. Again, if the rectification is done by somebody who's not an expert or who has no integrity, they come and paper over the cracks. So you pay for a false rectification program, because if it's structurally unsound, even if you put in cement there and you paper over the cracks, it will come back and it is going to tumble down. In one province, a young fellow, the house fell apart whilst he was sleeping, and he was left with only one room. He was lucky to escape with his life. The sad thing is that people lose their furniture and their clothes when these houses fall apart. Same thing happened in Bramfisherville. Scope creep is when you increase the scope. Dishonest certification of projects is piped to nowhere. How can we work together to improve the problem? You've already started the solution, and I think for me, I'm not in a position to even tell you what to do. You speak about Civilution. I think it's a great concept, because really, as I said, there are opportunities for everyone. There are opportunities for a win-win approach. If we all operate with integrity, there's scope for people to get rich while serving people with integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a very rich country, even though Nigeria has just become richer than us, but we still are a rich country. Yes, you have heard that the news channels are buzzed with news that Nigeria has just overtaken South Africa as a new economic powerhouse. I still believe, though, that we have more than enough money and resources in this country to deliver the constitutional promise of an improved quality of life to everyone. What will it take? Operating within rules. By and large, people do operate within rules, but the ones that have deviated from the rules have cost us immensely. The other day, I spoke to young people about the children of Israel having taken 40 years to get to the promised land. We've taken 20 right now. We don't want to take another 20 before everyone can honestly enjoy the right to human dignity. Because there's no dignity if you don't have a proper sewerage system. There's no dignity if you study at a school that has no classrooms. There's 4 classes in one, or you're studying under a tree. There's no dignity if you go to a hospital that can only give you aspirins because there is no infrastructure. There is enough money if we all do the right thing and avoid maladministration. It is our duty to play a role to ensure that ours is a state that is accountable, operates with integrity at all times, and is responsive to the needs of all its people. We have already started on the journey. Good luck.
you.